One summer night, July 1930, the stands were filled with eager fans awaiting the action to unfold. Among those sat a young, unassuming kid. Little did he know this night would change his life forever. As the game progressed against the Kansas City Monarchs, Cumberland Posey, the mastermind behind the Homestead Grays, summoned the kid from the stands. In a moment, Josh Gibson, the future legend, made his debut. Today, we're going to discuss the greatest player in baseball history, Josh Gibson. And if you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this at OneMikeHistory.com. But without further ado, let's get started. Gibson's story begins in Buena Vista, Georgia, where he was born to Mark and Nancy Gibson. He grew up with a younger brother, Jerry, who also joined the Negro Leagues, and his sister. 1923, the Gibson family relocated to Pittsburgh, where Mark found employment at Carnegie, Illinois Steel Company. Entering the 6th grade of a new city, young Gibson aspired to be an electrician. He enrolled at Allegheny Pre-Vocational School and later attended Conroy Pre-Vocational School. At 16, Gibson began his journey into baseball. He joined an amateur team in the Negro Greater Pittsburgh Industrial League, where he played third base. Concurrently, he worked as an elevator operator for Gimbels, who also sponsored the amateur team. His talent on the diamond didn't go unnoticed. The Pittsburgh Crawfords, then a semi-pro team under the guidance of Gus Greenlee, soon recruited him. By 1928, Gibson found himself on the cusp of a professional career. Balancing his job in Gimbels with his growing passion for baseball, Gibson's path still remained uncertain. In the summer of 1930, just 18, he was picked up by the Memphis Red Sox for a game in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Despite delivering a very commendable 2-for-4 performance, the manager, Candy Jim Taylor, was skeptical and bluntly declared that Gibson would never make it as a catcher. But fate would intervene. Late that year, in July 25th, 1930, Kansas City Monarchs were visiting Pittsburgh for an exhibition game. According to legend, Joe Williams was catching for the Homestead Grays that night, lost the ball due to poor visibility, and broke his finger. Seizing a moment, the owner, Cumberland Posey, reportedly called Josh Gibson out of the stand. Now, this is perhaps part myth, part true, but this was reportedly how Gibson's career began. Although he went hitless that night, he made no errors and was invited to stay with the team for the rest of the 1930 season. With each passing day, he honed his skills by catching balls in batting practice and gradually found his place into the lineup. In 1931, Homestead Grays joined the American Negro League. That team was packed with future legends like Judd Johnson, Cool Papa Bell, Bill Foster, and Judd Wilson. Under the leadership of Cumberland Posey, the Grays had compiled a roster that would rival any major league team. Despite these stars, 19-year-old Josh Gibson was the one who stole the spotlight. Posey boasted extraordinary home run counts for Gibson, 65 in 1930 and an astonishing 72 in 1931. These figures might seem mythical, but the legend of Josh Gibson lent them some credibility. One such story, shared by fellow Negro leader Jack Marshall, claimed that Gibson hit a ball clean out of Yankee Stadium in 1934. This earned him the moniker of the Black Babe Ruth. Gibson stood an imposing 6'2", 220 pounds, yet he propelled balls with the slow-rising, majestic art. His signature homers were line drives that soared no more than 20 feet off the ground, yet carried incredible distance. However, like any good story, Gibson's journey was not simple nor straightforward. Gibson found himself in a tug-of-war between Negro League teams. Just one day after renewing his contract with the Homestead Grays, he signed with Gus Greenlee's Pittsburgh Crawfords for just $100 more. Posey was enraged by this betrayal and scorned him publicly, declaring that he won't play in Pittsburgh. Today, baseball is a business. Behind the scenes, Gibson's life was far from carefree. Gibson married Helen Mason in 1929, and they lived modestly in Bedford Avenue in Pittsburgh. Tragically, though, Helen's pregnancy was aggravated an undiagnosed kidney condition. And by the time she reached the hospital, one of her kidneys had ruptured. She passed away in 1930, leaving Gibson with twins, Josh Jr., Helen. Grief-stricken, he decided that he wasn't fit to be a single father, so he left the twins with his in-laws, James and Margaret Mason. Baseball became his refuge, the sole arena where he could channel his inner turmoil into an heroic performance on the field. Meanwhile, tensions were escalating. Gibson felt exploited by his owner, Gus Greenlee, frustrated by Greenlee's refusal to give him a raise to $250 a month. Gibson made the bold move. In 1936, he leaped back to the Homestead Grays, but Greenlee remained unmoved. He listed Gibson on the Crawfords' 1937 roster without the raise. Unwilling to concede, Gibson held out, leading to his eventual trade back to the Grays in exchange for Pepper Bassett, Henry Spencerman, and $2,500. During this time, Gibson remained unfazed, and before his holdout, he hit an impressive 84 homers in 1936. Meanwhile, the lure of tropical paradises offered American players lucrative opportunity, transforming the landscape for the Negro League. Pitcher Satchel Paige, always the free agent, inked a summer contract in 1937 with the Dominican Republic team endorsed by dictator Rafael Trujillo. Serving as the ambassador for Los Dracones, Paige beckoned his teammates, Cool Papa Bell, Leroy Matlock, Sam Bankhead, Harry Williams, Henry Andrews, and Josh Gibson to join him for $3,000 each, assembling what many consider to be the greatest team in baseball history. For the next few years, Gibson would shuffle back and forth between Pittsburgh and Cuba from 1937 to around 1940. By 1941, Gibson found himself entangled in another contract scandal. Gibson abandoned the Homestead Grays merely days after inking a new deal. The enticement of an $800 a month salary found from Mexico's Veracruz team was just too tempting. Cumberland Posey, consumed by betrayal again, lambasted Gibson in the press, once stating that once again, we were left to pick up the pieces, just like we did in 1932, when Gibson leveraged the Grays contract to extort more money from the Pittsburgh Crawfords. This prompted Posey to initiate a lawsuit against Gibson, seeking compensation for damages inflicted against the Grays. His claim demanded $10,000 and the deed to Gibson's home. Despite the fallout, Gibson's stint in Mexico was marked with triumphs. He led the Veracruz team to a championship and was named the league MVP, giving Posey reason to reconsider. Gibson promised to return to the Grays in 1942, leading Posey to drop the lawsuit and offer him the princely sum of $1,500 a month, all the while remaining unaware of Gibson's declining health. Though his Mexican stint brought public glory, it privately consumed Gibson. He was already a heavy drinker. Him and teammate Sam Bankhead frequently downed beers in the dugout amidst the sweltering Mexican heat. But he had also descended into darker territory with his experimentation into heroin, a more potent indulgence that he had been dabbling with increasingly. His self-destructive habits only deepened with his separation from his second wife, Hattie, whose departure served as the final breach in Gibson's increasingly fragile world. The void that Hattie had left was filled with Grace Fontier, a polar opposite of stability. Grace was a heavy drinker and a known narcotics user, and matched Gibson's destructive behavior. During games, she would sit there in the stands, chain smoking, shivering on the hottest, most sweltering days. Gibson's body would mirror the turmoil in his life. Once a pillar of strength and finesse, his once muscular frame had deteriorated into an exhausted shell. 225 pounds that he lugged around now settled predominantly in his belly, an anchor that dragged down his abilities. Gibson had resorted to catching while standing, a desperate innovation to salvage some dignity he still had behind the plate. Posey and manager Vic Harris frequently found Gibson in compromising situations, but they quietly sidelined him when his drunkenness rendered him unfit, sidestepping direct confrontation. Remarkably, despite all of these black marks, Gibson still managed to hit .323 during league games in 1942 with 11 home runs in just 40 games. However, 1942 would bring Gibson stabbing headaches, easily dismissed as mere hangovers until a seizure on January 1st, 1943 that plunged him into a 6-hour coma. Newspaper hastily declared it a nervous breakdown, and doctors diagnosed him with exhaustion, prescribing him bed rest. 1943 saw him hit an incredible .526, a testament to his resilience. But by 1944, his cracks were undeniable. His once formidable power was gone. Towering home runs were just a memory. Yet he still managed to hit .393 in 1945, adjusting his game to fend off the signs of his lifestyle and his age. Cumberland Posey's management performed a delicate dance, concealing Gibson's struggles with alcohol and heroin from the public gaze. But the true demon would reveal itself in 1934. He had a terminal brain tumor. Ever to fight, Gibson shrouded his affliction, pouring all of the effort that he had left into the field, cloaking the devastation that was eroding him from within. In his final chapters in 1946, saw Gibson playing in the Puerto Rican League, his health spiraling, culminating in a harrowing episode where he was discovered naked and disoriented in the San Juan streets. Arrested and sent home, he would succumb to a grueling cycle of headaches, dizzy spells, and seizures. January 20th, 1947, Josh Gibson would pass away from what was termed a stroke. His funeral at Macedonia Baptist Church drew thousands. His legacy, one of extraordinary athleticism interwoven with profound personal demons, still managed to leave an indelible mark on the annals of baseball. Later that year, in April of 1947, Jackie Robinson shattered Major League's racial barrier. Yet Larry Dobbs, who followed suit in the American League in July, maintained that Gibson was the pinnacle of black talent. Reflecting later, Dobby laminated, "One of the things that was disappointing and disheartening to a lot of black players at the time is that Jackie was not the best player. The best player was Josh Gibson. I think that's one of the reasons why he died so early. He was heartbroken." Thank you. This has been One My Black History, and this has been the story of Josh Gibson. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this. OneMikeHistory.com. Also, if you like to support the channel, do some Buy Me Coffee, Patreon page in the description below. I'd like to thank all my subscribers. Without you, none of this could be possible. I love you all, and peace.